Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting of the Housing Policy Board. Call the meeting to order. And as usual, we start off with introductions. My name is Norton Cabell. I'm your chair, as long as it's your pleasure.
John Van Lanningham, I'm a member.
Stephanie Jennings, City of Eugene staff.
Chris Pryor, Eugene City Council.
Jennifer Lee, board member. Lisa Kennedy, City of Eugene staff. Marina Brasfield, minutes reporter.
Steve Noakes, Homes for Good Housing Agency, ex officio member.
Daniel Ivey, HPD member.
Karen Sachs with Nedco, stepping in for Emily Ryman, ex officio member as well.
Isaac Judd, member at large.
Chris Wigg, Housing Policy Board member.
And out there,
Oh,
yeah, Ruth.
Ruth Finland, citizen.
James Houston, citizen. Terry McDonald from St. Vincent de Paul.
Timothy Powell at St. Vincent de Paul.
Charles Dunaway, citizen.
Roy Gaither, citizen.
Cheryl Stetson-Landman, Manufactured Housing, Oregon Tenants Association. Jessica C. Green, Egg Community 2. Julie Lambert, citizen.
Joshua Caraco, Springfield Union Tenants Association.
Matthew Houston, resident.
Harry Houston, citizen.
Okay, thank you. Welcome all. So next on the agenda is public comment. I have 4 people here who want to speak. So we'll start with James Houston.
May I sit?
You may.
Honorable Board, the 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, the last in our cherished Bill of Rights, states that the powers not given to the federal government are the exclusive domain of the states. It is often referred to as states' rights. I submit to you that this long-established principle of government equally applies to the citizens of each state, more specifically counties and municipalities. Here in Oregon, like in other states, affordable housing and how it contributes to the burgeoning homeless population is at an all-time crisis level. It seems here in Lane County and Eugene there is more focus, more resources being targeted to those already homeless. I believe a piece of the puzzle in addressing this multifaceted societal scourge should be preventive, not reactive. We must find a way to slow down where the homeless are coming from here locally. We must stave off the problem, and one such way is, as you know, affordable housing. I'm a resident of Falconwood Village Retirement Manufactured Home Community. Many of you know it has received negative media coverage for elder abuse by way of financial exploitation, multiple state investigations, as well as actions taken by politicians in Salem to enact statutes to better protect manufactured homeowners and those who are considered low income, such as the majority of tenants of Falconwood Village who are on fixed incomes, having once been able to subside on Social Security or a pension, but no longer able to do so. The ever-increasing rent there is forcing some to have to move, and yes, some to either become homeless or have to sell their homes at a forced sale price and live with their children or siblings or go into subsidized housing. I am not here today to single out a bad player in one aspect of Eugene's continuum of housing resources. I am here to propose one piece of the puzzle that I believe logically and sensibly help address affordable housing and homelessness here in our fine city. It is simple. Abolish ORS 91.225 by way of referendum. Oregon is the first state in our nation to enact statewide rent control, that being Senate Bill 608. Although a noble attempt to curtail skyrocketing housing rent, it is a double-edged sword that has harmed many, if not most. It has hurt those it was intended to help. Half of Eugene's population rent shelter, and our community should have the right to address this problem as it exists here and now. How it is reflected uniquely in our community. This sense of fair play should equally apply statewide. You can call it counties and cities' rights. I have to single out and thank John Van Lanningham for having educated me on the statutory aspects of rent control in Oregon. He pointed out ORS 91.225. The law was enacted 34 years ago in 1985. Times have changed since then. It is a law that prohibits counties and municipalities from enacting rent control. When the state legislated a 7% cap on annual rent control, plus the now 3.3 consumer price index, the de facto result was a 10.3 increase in annual rent. This goes beyond being harmful for low-income households such as seniors, the disabled, and many single-parent families. I know it sent shockwaves through many of my neighbors, and now some feel hopeless and helpless in being forced out of their homes, manufactured homes they own, because they can't afford the lot rent. As it is now, Falconwood and other parks are no longer doing modest annual rent increases such as 3 or 4%, but 7% or more. What Salem did was enrich the pockets of landlords and harm many citizens, putting them in a dilemma that is now much worse than it was before this harmful law was enacted. There is a solution. I believe it is one that would be successful and the right thing to do. It could express the long-cherished principle of our great nation. It is called the will of the people. Oregon has had a long tradition of utilizing referendums and initiatives to address mistakes made in Salem. I believe undertaking a referendum effort to repeal ORS 91.225 is what is now called for. Let the citizens speak by way of their vote, removing it from the self-interest of politicians and lobbyists. My understanding is it will take the signatures of about 104,000 registered voters statewide to allow the people to speak out on next year's ballot. This is doable. It only takes effort. But effort can only be successful if counties and cities take a stand in favor of such an endeavor. I am here today asking this esteemed body to endorse such an undertaking by, first of all, issuing a statement for the rights of counties and municipalities to deal with the housing crisis as best fits their individual communities. Second, a recommendation by you to the City Council to issue a proclamation embracing such an undertaking can be the match that lights the fuse. I am certain other counties and cities would follow suit with Eugene's brave, noble, and caring first step. The logistics for such an undertaking is far from insurmountable. I am willing and able to use my energy and resources to work with other grassroots organizations throughout the state to obtain the signatures, and of course do fundraising. There already exist many such activist groups throughout the state, those who have pushed for rent control in their communities. An army can grow from such a pool of those zealous about addressing homelessness and reasonable rent control. If you are interested, I am preparing a strategic plan that I would be only too happy to share with you for further discussion, consideration, and molding. I do, however, throw some caution into the wind. Time is a valuable, crucial factor facing how to get this done, with next July being the deadline. This is not something that can be talked to death. Perhaps, if you are amenable to supporting this idea, the city can assign someone to help guide me, to keep political supporters in the loop, or even take an ownership. I just want to be a foot soldier, not a general. And if you are opposed to such an attempt, I likewise ask that a vote of some sort be made by you folks indicating as such and the reasons why. Such a thing can only educate myself and others on how to better sell this, as I am a novice to both such an endeavor and the behind-the-scenes politics. I may be old, but this is one dog that can learn new tricks.
Thank you. So we have mobile home park issues on the agenda for later, so thank you for your remarks. I'm not adhering to the 3-minute rule.
It's okay.
We're a little bit more flexible. Todd?
Todd Boyle, Eugene. Please do something to make more housing available at prices of $300 a month or less, or of capital cost of $50,000 or less, which is about 20% of our city can afford. And there's nothing. It's being removed from them because it's being bid out from under them. It goes on and on and on, and this policy board should be doing something, as the gentleman before me just said. That's only one idea out of 25 things. Everybody has their favorite idea, you know, but how about doing something? that actually empirically generates more housing for $300 a month. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Good to continue to keep that in on our agenda. Majeska.
Majeska C. Screen, and with the little nonprofit A Community Together, or ACT. And I just want to say a little bit more, following up on what I said at the last meeting, which I see is summarized in minutes, about the need for it to be easier for the public to monitor and understand what groups like this one are working on. I know it's pretty important, although even I have to keep reminding myself sometimes why this stuff is so important. But I know virtually, hardly anybody else in the community that has any sense of the importance of this kind of group among the various groups working on the poverty and homelessness issue, especially for the very lowest income people. And my thing is about the civic engagement, the community organizing that's needed. And a part of the civic engagement that I want to mention to you is the issue of the accessibility and transparency of the kind of work that you do. And I really appreciate that Mr. Boyle is videoing these meetings pretty regularly now. And I think that I would like to ask the City of Eugene and the county if they have any page on their website for, I'd like to ask the City of Eugene, which I believe does have a page on their website about the Housing Policy Board, to please regularly put a link to the videos that are made, even though they're made independently. You could help make them more available and accessible. I know it was really kind of unusual when the Planning Commission posted links to Todd's videos for the housing, what was it called, the Tools and Strategies meeting. And I think that's kind of unprecedented, actually. But I want to urge you to do that, please, for this group's work as well, because it's really fairly easy and accessible way for more people to be able to get a sense of the importance of the work that you do, and even find more ways to participate and impact the work that you do. Thank you.
Thanks, Majeska.
Jessica?
I just want to note I like that idea,
Yeah,
if it's possible.
I made a note. Josh?
Hi, most of you know me, I'm Josh. I've been doing a lot of work with the Springfield Eugene Tenant Association, getting that off the ground. Not everything I say is for officially on behalf of CETA. I just want to speak to a couple things that happened at the last meeting really quickly, although I really appreciate what Jessica just said. And I think I have some overlap. I think in terms of the renter protections committee, CETA felt a little slighted that as a new organization for helping tenants, we didn't have someone included on that committee, especially when everyone here seems happy to refer their own tenants to us as a place to go. And that's the only thing I think that I'm saying is kind of more officially on behalf of CETA. But I personally wanted to talk more representation again, because I think I seem to be slamming home a point a lot. I really appreciated at the end there that we had some elected officials, Joe Verney and Chris Pryor, want to include Nigel Mosby on that committee. Because when have we ever seen like an older black veteran on housing assistance included on any sort of committee ever, and wanting that opinion? But at that same time, Candace was sitting next to me at that meeting, and the way Chris phrased it, he was like, I think we should allow Nigel to be on that committee. And I was like, yeah, this is good. They're actually maybe listening. And Candace was like, you mean ask him to be on that committee? And I was like, yeah, she's right. At first I was like, wait, this is cool. Nothing like this has ever happened. But I thought about it a little, and she's like, she was right. Rhetoric is important. People's opinions are valuable. You're not some all-powerful entities allowing people to participate. Their opinions need to be included because they are valuable, and just as valuable, if not more valuable, than any of yours at that table. And just those simple words are important, and it's cool to have elected. And I think that shows in the makeup of said committee when your initial plan is like 3-3-3, when our community is 51% renter, and on a committee devoted to the protections of renters, the committee is not even devoted to the protections of renters, is not even made up of 50% renters, let alone Housing Policy Board, which again has one renter who is on it, who is also a landlord. So we need to include more diverse voices, and more people are actually affected by problems. And not just because principally it sounds good, but also because they bring different perspectives and new ideas that aren't the same things we've been hearing for the past 20 years that have dug us into, or longer, I don't know, that have dug us into the hole that we're in now. And I could probably go on for hours.
But you won't.
I won't, because generally, I like and appreciate and respect all the work that a lot of people in this room do, but still get annoyed and frustrated sometimes. And that's a great example, I think, of where we can do better, you can do better. Thank you.
So Josh, you're not on the Renter Protection Committee, but I assume you're going to come and participate.
People will be. I think someone from CETA is definitely coming on Wednesday. It may or may not be me.
Okay.
There's also a fair housing training
But-
that day, and I now talk to people on the
But
phone all the
your
time.
input is valued.
Can I take this? I get it. I had one more thing,
Okay.
actually. Sorry. I literally got a call, and I can't give you any details because that would be privacy, about Acorn Properties a week after I complained here about you appointing Jim Straub to that committee. And anything more would be privacy things, but we've only taken like 40-ish calls at CETA. And I'm, stop putting foxes in charge of the hen house.
Does anybody else? I mean, that's all I have signed up for public comment, but if anybody else, yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Tim Morris. I'm not going to take up too much of your time. I am the board president of the Springfield Eugene Tenant Association, but I'm not coming here under that hat. I am just here to share the Patrician Mobile Home Park debacle that's happening right now. Just in case you're not aware, in Springfield, the current city council is debating between rezoning a low-income mobile home park into a mixed-use zone. Now, as you can imagine, for the seniors living there, the up to 130 seniors, many of them are veterans, disabled, and on fixed incomes. It's probably not a great plan for them. So I wanted to bring this to your attention and let you know that the vote is happening on September 16th, and that's going to be at 7 o'clock at the Springfield City Council. The Springfield Eugene Tenant Association will be there in an official capacity, as well as other organizations such as SAFER, through CAUSA, through CALC, and we are also in communications with AARP, Medco, that kind of stuff. So just making sure that this is aware and that this is at the forefront of our minds. This will also, as I've heard, then other mobile home parks are keeping an eye on this situation as well. So the decision made this next week will be a decision that's going to be made across the state and potentially across the country. Something to keep an eye on. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, while he's sitting down, let me note that 4 of the 5 prior Springfield Lane County Commissioners opposed, including Commissioner Burney, Commissioner Dwyer, Commissioner Cornacchia, Commissioner Tafazio.
One of these things is not like the other.
Sorry.
Okay, moving along, minutes approval. I just have 2 comments. On the ADU section on page 5, at the end of the first paragraph, they found 5-6 regulations, owner occupancy, bedroom limit, occupancy limit, blue cleared, flag lots, dog keeping?
I question that also.
What does that mean?
I don't remember, not that I'm an expert on 1051, but I don't remember anything about dog keeping in the bill.
Could you ask Alyssa, Stephanie? This
I'm
was
sorry,
her, wasn't it?
I can ask Alyssa, yes.
Okay.
Maybe just 4 things.
What?
Maybe just 4 things.
Yeah. And then, there's talk about what Springfield is doing, and what did happen?
You mean the follow-up on the numbers?
Yeah, oh yeah, the follow-up on the numbers. Thank you, Aaron.
Okay, I have the numbers.
Please.
At least from April of 2017, so in the last 2 years, we've had 24 land use applications. I wasn't able to get building permits. So 24 in the last 2 years. Previous to that, I think it was two applications in 8 years.
Yeah.
So,
So it is making an impact.
yeah.
And the change was the waiver of the SDC?
Change was the waiver. I think we really started to see the change when the code changes went into place, not just the waiver.
So we should note that's Aaron Fifield from Springfield City staff.
What are you talking about?
ADUs.
Accessory dwelling unit.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry, accessory dwelling units. Oh,
Granny
dear.
flats.
Okay, any other comments on the minutes?
Yes.
Yes, John.
Same page, starting at the top. Alyssa is a planner and not a planer. A planer is a woodworking tool, so there should be 2 ends there. On the second line, Senate Bill 1051 was adopted in 2017, not 2019. This first line of the next paragraph, House Bill 2001 is effective August of 2019, not January of 2019. In the paragraph more than halfway down that starts with my name, mentioned that Senator Dembro, the second line should say outside urban growth boundaries, not just urban growth. And the next to last paragraph that starts with House Bill 2812, delete that phrase, increase the document recording fee and. Lord willing, that might have happened, but it did not. There was no increase of the document recording fee, so I don't know how that got into there. That, what 2812 did was make a homeownership assistance program more flexible in terms of income of applicants, not raise more money. On the next page, page 6, the first full paragraph starts with HB 2164 and 2896. Protecting residents of manufactured home park residents. Take out the first residents of, just because there's too many residents in that line. And then the description in the next to last line of that paragraph of House Bill 2896 is way off. I probably said something that was complicated, but maybe we could just say that 2896 addressed park purchases and home replacement. And maybe we'll talk more about that when we get to that agenda item today. In the next paragraph that starts with HB 2164, delete 2164 and Senate Bill 790 and the and. So it should just read HB 3133 does the rest. And leave out anything about 790. And then on the last paragraph, 3349 was a mortgage interest deduction reform bill, and delete the rest of that line.
Chris?
Yeah, I noticed one correction also. At the very top of the page, it says, council went against this bill because they wanted it amended. Officially, council just went against the bill. So you can take out the because they wanted it amended.
However many times.
Correct.
However many.
I was the only one that wanted it amended. Everyone else just wanted it gone.
Okay, anybody else on the minutes? Then I will deem them approved as corrected. Few items from Housing Policy Board committee board members and staff. I don't think I have any.
One thing, I mentioned at the last meeting, it's in the minutes, that the aforementioned Jim Straub, whom I should note I'm very fond of and have great respect for, and I gave a presentation at something called the Coastal Caucus Conference in Florence last month. The Coastal Caucus is all the legislators on the coast, Democrats and Republicans, They have a fair amount of influence. They have some significant housing issues, somewhat different than ours, especially with vacation rental homes, and a restricted amount of land because the Coast Range and the ocean get in the way. Jim Straub and I were part of a panel with Margaret Salazar, who's the Director of Housing Community Services, Cameron Smith, the Director of Business and Community Services, Jim Rue, the Director of the Department of Land Conservation and Development, and a PSU professor named Marissa Zapata, who is an expert in land use and homelessness. It was a good panel. Jim talked mostly about Senate Bill 608, and there was a big audience. Jim and I are repeating something like that in 2 weeks, Thursday the 19th, with the Springfield City Club at noon in Springfield.
Good. Right. That's it.
Just a couple of things. Actually, in responding to some of the comment we got today, with regard to the best way to prevent homelessness is to prevent homelessness. The recent Technical Advisory Commission report that the county and the city received had 10 recommendations for dealing with homelessness. Only one of those recommendations dealt with shelters, and 9 of those recommendations dealt with ways to prevent people from losing their homes or falling into homelessness. So we not only recognize the points you're making, but we embrace them, and developing strategies that are specifically geared towards keeping people in their homes or helping them to provide affordable housing is the focus of the entire TAC report, which there's a committee working on implementation as we speak. The second one I wanted to mention was the question was raised about posting or linking to videos, for example, the ones that Todd is making. I've had conversations about this before, about what is the availability and the desirability of linking to videos that are not produced as part of the city's official process. And while I absolutely trust Todd's videos as being, accurate and true representations of what happens in the meetings, we have all known that there are now instances of people who will video meetings and then edit the videos to make whatever point they want to make, and then post them online. So I think the position of the city is, unless the city actually pays for the video or can control the content of that video, it will not be posted on the city's website. But I can talk with the city and see if there might be a way to link with a disclaimer that this video is in no way generated or supervised or controlled by the city of Eugene. View it at your own risk, and see if maybe something like that might be possible to do. But we need to be very careful about official videos from the city of Eugene being generated and supervised by the city of Eugene. So there may be something to work out, but that's why we don't just post people's videos on the city website.
Okay. Todd, you want to comment?
I could just give you the footage, and since it's archival footage and there's no cuts, then it's pretty easy to verify that it hasn't been modified.
Yeah, there may be some way we can deal with it.
Let's not get into the weeds.
Yeah, but that'll be a conversation we can have later.
Jenna? Darcy?
Well, I just have on Friday, Homes for Good submitted an application to the state for the Permanent Supportive Housing Consortium idea. So the state of Oregon's putting out a lot of money for permanent supportive housing, and they're structuring it so that they're giving required trainings, and they're asking for teams to be, teams to apply for that money. And what they'll do is they'll require these teams to go to 6 trainings over 6 months, and those teams will get the priority for the $20 million of permanent supportive housing capital funding that'll be coming out, in addition to service dollars also. And so we applied with Lane County and Shelter Care and Quantum Residential. And then our hope is also that city staff would also be able to come to the trainings once they get those set up, assuming we're successful. So that's pretty exciting. What they're trying to do is have units on the ground through these teams by the middle of 2021 already. So the timeline's really quick, and so we're gonna have to, assuming we get picked, we'll have to move pretty quickly. But it's the timing of the money is really perfect for the need in the community right now. So it's.
Who is Quantum?
So Quantum Residential, they're a property management company, and they're doing the third-party property management at the Commons of MLK. And they have quite a bit of supportive housing experience from, several of the staff members worked at Bud Clark Commons in Portland, and so they have a really good, good experience.
Okay, thank you. Daniel?
Yeah, I just wanted to, for the record, I reiterate what Tim had said about the patrician. I know that we're going to talk about mobile home parks later. And then also tonight at City Council, there's an opportunity to speak about the upcoming accessory dwelling unit vote, as well as the approval of MUFD funds for a 50-unit property. If anybody has questions about either of those things, please see me, Daniel Ivey, and we can talk about it.
So is the council going to act tonight on the ADU stuff, or is that
No.
next Monday?
That's a week from now.
Yeah.
I know Emily mentioned it last time I saw in the minutes, but we are going through our branding and name change. So officially, as of the 18th, we will be a new named organization. So
That's a good name.
What's that name?
Ooh, I know, right?
Is that the
So,
name?
it's very exciting. It's the organization that couldn't figure out a name because we're horrible at naming things.
The
But-
artist formerly known as.
Exactly. I was like, can't we just be a symbol? So,
Nice.
yeah, so hopefully you all love it. And it will be announced the morning of the 18th.
So apparently it's going to be announced in Corvallis.
Soft, soft little whispers in Corvallis. But yes, if you want to drive up to Corvallis the evening of the 12th, you will get a little preview.
Soft
And maybe a pet. But yeah.
Nothing new.
Chris?
Yeah, a couple things. First off, I'm really glad that Tim is here because I was going to say, is it James, meet Tim, Tim, meet James. You guys have a lot of stuff to talk about, and I'm really glad that Tim showed up because I was going to tell you to call him. And so I really appreciate your feedback. Thank you for coming today to share. I see that. All right. And then the second thing
We're
I
all
want
happy to be part of that introduction.
Yes, here we are. And then the second thing I wanted to bring
I
up
apologize.
is that I received a message yesterday that Councilor Taylor plans to make a motion to the Eugene City Council to move to direct the city manager to not begin a process for complying with HB 2001 and instead work to obtain a legislative repeal of House Bill 2001 during the 2020 legislative session. That is a colossally bad idea, and if it's in order, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that this body send a message to the City Council through the chair that we believe that that is a horrible idea. Is that in order?
What do you all think?
Chris, what do you think?
I think it's a colossally bad idea. And the reason is...
What, the motion?
If the council wants to try to have that legislation repealed, that's fine, let them go there. I think to put all your eggs in one basket and have no plan B is incredibly foolish, because if we do not have a locally generated set of codes and policies in place by 2020, what's the month, January of 2020?
I can't remember.
The state will
I
impose
thought there was
theirs.
more time.
So by saying, oh, we're just going to stick our head in the sand and just try to get it repealed and do nothing else is crazy. That's the only word I can think of. So if this body wants to say it is foolish to not have a plan B, in other words, to not try to work on generating a local plan, even if you want to try to repeal it, is the better way to go.
Yeah, how about, let me amend my suggestion to be.
You haven't got a second yet, so go ahead.
Let me amend that to be, to encourage the City Council to consider a locally specific option for the implementation. Is that's we cast things in the positive here. I like that.
Yeah, to ensure that we work locally to generate a locally a local policy.
What he said.
Anybody want to comment?
I fully support that as well.
He's probably looking for a second.
I second that.
I'm strongly in favor of 2001. I don't want to have us get in some sort of position where it becomes about us and not about 2001. So I don't know whether the council would be offended or whether it would be counterproductive for us to take a position. That's my only concern.
Maybe here's a possible solution, and this is kind of what John is saying. Right now, if we don't do anything, we will begin work on a local code and policy to meet the needs of 2001. So maybe the only thing we need to do is to say, we encourage you not to vote for this motion. Because that way, if nothing passes, we'll continue to start working on it.
That's also good.
Second.
Yeah, I second that.
Anybody want to say anything? No? Okay. Shall we vote? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? So we did that unanimously?
One abstention.
You're abstaining?
Mhm.
Okay. Joe's abstaining. Commissioner Burney is abstaining.
I respond to either.
All right. Anything else from you?
I'm just glad that Tim is here.
You already said that.
I know.
Okay.
I just wanted to reiterate.
Okay. Joe, anything from you?
Yes, I'm not going to go overboard with how happy I am that Tim is here.
You're also happy.
Either way, I wanted to, if I may, expand on what John mentioned as a parend, and that is that I had the honor of joining two of my predecessors, Commissioner Dwyer and Commissioner Cornacchia. Commissioner Cornacchia actually initiated that. I would like this group to know. So this is very bipartisan as it related to our encouraging the Springfield City Council, because I appreciate all that, but as a Springfield resident, the Springfield City Council to not consider rezoning. I also want to point out Lori, right? I mean, are my eyes good enough? Is Lori here?
Yep.
Yeah. Lori, do I pronounce your name Hauber? Well, that tells me no.
Hauber.
Lori did an absolutely wonderful job organizing myself, my fellow commissioners, and the Eugene Springfield Tenants Association, and I just want this body to know that it was, I think, very impactful. I would like to state, to annotate some of Tim's remarks, the Springfield City Council does not have to make a decision on September 16th. It's a second reading. One of those council members that absolutely would vote against rezoning will not be there on the 16th. So I'm encouraging, actually, that there be a ton of people there, but that vote hopefully not occur if it's looking like it might be getting a little slippery. I won't extol the reasons why, but I will say there was also a manufactured home park owner which explained to the city council that not only is he not selling, but he has in his will that his children will not sell that manufactured home park and will not displace any tenants, which I think is a story. I think there's a real good story here between your typical investment without consideration of the human costs, because just the consideration of this rezoning has caused a level of anxiety and fear amongst residents that even if politically we win and it does not occur, you can't change that. And it's such a psychic toll. And I'm sorry I'm taking too long, but I just wanted to point that out. And I was just, as a kidding aside, wondering, you mentioned it was at the Eugene City Council identified 10 reasons for homelessness. Were any of them the distribution of wealth, resources, income, and opportunity across the United States?
They didn't want to get into that kind of a controversial area now.
Okay. I'm done. Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Items from staff?
Yes. So there are 3 items that I wanted to discuss. So many of you have been tracking the city's adoption of a construction excise tax and the creation of affordable housing trust fund. So the city is in the process of forming the advisory committee. Applications for the committee closed on Friday. We received 37 applications for the committee, so we will be reviewing those. It is the city manager's decision to designate the membership of that committee, and so we will be working on that in the coming weeks, and do anticipate trying to have the first meeting in October, as we are trying to get back to council by January. So there'll be more on that at the next Housing Policy Board meeting. The second item that I wanted to mention, Ellen May Galloway is not able to be here today, but as she mentioned, I believe at the last meeting, the housing RFP for home resources is available. So any project idea and the resources available through that RFP are actually for projects in Springfield. So Aaron is here. If you want to talk with Aaron, you could talk with Aaron or myself in Ellen's absence if you have any questions about that RFP. The third item that I wanted to mention is that every year, City of Eugene and City of Springfield create what's known as the Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report. And this is a report on our use of federal home and CDBG dollars. And so that report, the draft of that report is now available. You can find it on the website. And there's also a copy downstairs at the front desk if you want to access it in person. And this outlines the projects that we've been able to support using home and CDBG funds. There's a lot of really good information in there for folks who are wanting to know what's happening regarding these resources. And then lastly, I did just want to mention one more relevant upcoming council item. On Monday, September 23rd, there will be a work session on short-term vacation rentals. And that item is being led by Lydia Kay, who is the head of the Building and Permit Services Division within Planning and the Planning Development Department.
When is that?
That is September 23rd at 5:30.
The council work session?
It's a council work session. And that was in response to a council poll for that item.
Great.
Okay.
Difficult subject.
Sure, just, again, it was in the packet, but there is a fair housing training that's being organized between St. Vincent de Paul and Fair Housing Council of Oregon on September 11th from 9 to 11 at the Methodist Church on 13th Avenue. And the focus will just be not only just fair housing basics, but also advocating for people with disabilities under fair housing law.
Okay, thanks. Yes.
I want to supplement some information about 2001 for Chris was talking about the effective date. One of the beauties of having iPhones to look at the actual bill, but the larger cities are required to comply with the bill by June 30 of 2022. If they don't, then they are required to comply with a model ordinance that DLCD is directed to draft by the end of this year. So that's where the January 1 thing comes in.
So if we don't do what, January 20?
If you don't, if the city doesn't implement House Bill 2001 by June 30 of 2022,
Right.
then DLCD's model ordinance applies.
Which will be available at the end of the year.
Retroactively?
No, but as of that date, as I understand the bill,
So what happens on January 2020?
nothing.
Well, except that the
The bill's in effect.
The bill goes into effect.
The
Okay.
bill's in effect.
And the model must be available.
Yes, and the model has to be available, but you're not required to have complied with the rest of the ordinance
Until 22.
June 2022.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Aaron, you've nodded several times. Do you have anything you'd like to add to us?
Feel free to reach out, all you housing developers out there.
Okay. Anybody else from staff here? That is-
Mr. Chair. The second time I showed Tim's appreciation for Tim, I was actually trying to stall because I forgot what I was actually going to say. I want to apologize to the committee that I have to leave at 1:15 p.m. So if I get up, it's not because you offended me. I'm sorry. that was what I actually meant to say the second time.
So
Look
next,
at you.
next on the agenda is manufactured home parks, and I think Emily is supposed to be leading this?
Yeah, I'm happy, I'm ready, don't worry.
Okay,
And I think Terry too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to invite Terry to the table?
Huh?
Do you want to invite
Oh,
Terry?
Terry, you want to come join us? For those of you who all don't know, this is Terry McDonald from St. Vincent de Paul.
Hello. I'm Tim. I'm my mobile home park division director. So, you want me to schedule it?
Sure, yes.
All right. Well, I'm not going to pretend that I can tell very much about resident-owned park programs around the United States because John Van Lanningham has been working on that project for 20 years plus, isn't it, John? Yeah. But that model for dealing with mobile home parks is for the residents to purchase the parks using a financial set of tools that are out there available nationwide, pretty much through the ROC movement. And that's a pretty well designed, pretty well run program. So we've seen some of those parks here in Lane County go into the resident home park model. Seen a lot of them appreciating marketplaces like Portland and elsewhere. That's not what St. City Paul does. St. City Paul is interested in holding on to and redeveloping older parks that often have poor structures and poor infrastructure and units that are well past their usable life. And we define being past their usable life as when the parks are inhabited by mostly mobiles that are pre-76, which is the old HUD standard. And we know that those parks often have a really whole series of problems associated with them. Because if they've got the old mobiles on them, probably the infrastructure is as old as those units and it's falling apart. And we've developed, or we've purchased and redeveloped 8 parks thus far around the state. And each one of them comes with a particularly interesting set of problems, and they're not uniform. So one of the things that we've learned about parks, these older parks, is that whatever you go in with your budget as being, you should probably double it. So let me give you some examples of what that looks like. We recently purchased a 33-unit park in Portland. It's called Oakley Mobile Home Park. It's on Killingsworth in northeast Portland. It has all pre-76 mobiles on it, and some of them were inhabited, some of them were not. And what we found out that after we purchased the park, that number one, you couldn't have 33 units on the park legally. The maximum number you could have on the park was 22. And the second part was is that we didn't know going into that project, but the units that were on the park were never hooked up to the sewer. They were never hooked up to septic either. They just had vaults underneath them. So unexpected little surprises are not uncommon on mobile home parks. Especially parks that are in rural areas, they also have other issues associated with them. And one of the most obvious ones is crime. So when we took over the Oak Ridge Mobile Home Park about 5 years ago, that park, which was 60 units, accounted for 50% of the crime in the city of Oak Ridge. And as a result, the reason is pretty straightforward. These are units that are well past their useful life in most cases. The units were not being maintained at all, and so they were really a housing type of last resort for people that wanted to live there. And often that drew in some people that had significant behavioral problems. We also just, about 2 years ago, purchased a Saginaw trailer court. That's down in Saginaw, just north of Cottage Grove. That particular park was another entertaining one. For those of you that remember the Saginaw trailer court over the years, John, I think you do, when we went to close that property, we did the title report on it. Normally, title reports on a property like this would have 3 to 4 pages of notes on it. This had 176. It had been foreclosed on 3 times. And
This is Ken Olson's place.
literally have raw sewage running down underneath the homes. So, you know, these parks are important on the ladder, however, of housing out there. Because the truth is that they are often the housing of last resort for people that live in them. The problem is that if the infrastructure is collapsing and if the units are well past their usable life, what are you going to do about it? So that's where the purchase by a nonprofit and stabilizing the parks is really a very important thing. Umpqua CDC has been doing it. Neighborhoods Umpqua down in Roseburg has done some of this, and we're the other practitioner that's been doing this type of work. How many units in parks are there out there? The estimate that we heard from Oregon Housing is that there's probably about 40,000 occupied pre-76 units in the state of Oregon. So there's a significant reservoir of that housing type out there. The second part is, of course, if they're a pre-76 unit, it can't be moved off the site. once they go to wherever they're at, they're gonna stay there. They're not gonna be moved off the site for two reasons. One, no other park will take them. But the second reason is just as important. They're laced with asbestos. And so the typical cost to deconstruct one of these single voids is about $10,000. So what you end up with is parks where there's a lot of pre-76 units, people, for whatever reason, are going to have to leave if the parks are going to be closed, like we're talking about with the patrician. They will get a settlement money, a certain amount of money from the mobile home park closure fund. But unfortunately, it's not enough to pay for the deconstruction of the 376 unit. So if the person is a homeowner in that situation, it puts them in a very precarious position where you don't have enough money to deconstruct it, you have no place to move. But having said that, no place will take you once you moved. So the strategy that we've been working on is that when we purchase a park, increasingly we're looking at simply replacing all the units with new units as fast as possible, either by making them available for home ownership for families, and we've done 5 up in Portland just most recently, or else by just replacing the units and making them renter occupied. So that will then get us a housing type that we can sustain over time. Fortunately, there are some new tools that are being developed to help on that purchase and replacement of those units. One is that if you're replacing a pre-76 unit, you can get up to $2,500 refund or funding from Bonneville Power Administration.
As long as it's NEEM certified Energy Star.
Right, it's replaced with a NEEM or Energy Star unit. Likewise, we've been getting some pretty good cooperation from the Bonneville Environmental Foundation, that's it. In terms of getting subsidies and grants to do photovoltaic displays. So if you go out to the Saginaw Trailer Court, the Saginaw Trailer Court currently has 40 units in it, and it has about a half acre of photovoltaic paid for by the Bonneville Environmental Foundation, and that reverse meters back for the benefit of the tenants that are in the park. So it's a pretty good deal in terms of driving down the cost of those units. Likewise, NOAA, Network of Oregon Affordable Housing, has been very generous in terms of financing mobile up to 100%. So that's another tool that we have available out there to replace those older units. But the real challenge always is the infrastructure. Because on these older parks, especially if they're in rural areas, they're often on septic and on well water. And in many cases, that really is an impediment to keeping that park in operation. So the example is at Saginaw Trailer Court. That's a very expensive park to run because it has asbestos in its water, or it has arsenic in its water. And as a result of that, we constantly have to change the filters out in that system. It's quite expensive to do. At the mobile home park that we have up in Junction City, that particular park is right on the edge of the urban service area. And as a result of that, we're starting to get increasing nitrate infiltration into the well, and it's going to have to be hooked up to the city sewer at sewer and water sometime soon, which is quite expensive for that effort up in Junction City. It's quite expensive to hook up to the city water. So those rural parks often have many different ways of being problematic in the long term, as well as just the water, the pumps and the filtration systems themselves are often a difficult issue. The other part is that many of these parks that are especially in rural areas, they have been overdeveloped. So as with the park up in Portland, or as with the park that we have out at River Road, the Harwood Mobile Home Park, in each case, those parks were permitted to have a certain number of units on it, and the septic systems were built to take that. However, because no one watches very much, the landlords increase the number of units on the site over time. In the case of the one up in Portland, they increased the amount by 50%. In the case of Harwood, they did about 30%. In other parks around, we've seen that they've done equally much or more than that, increasing number of units. The problem with that is that the infrastructure was never set up to develop or to hold that much effluent that comes out of that park. And so the result is you often have failures of those parks and DEQ findings that you're increasing the amount of pollution around the park because the septic systems were never designed to hold that much product. In urban areas such as Springfield, where we have parks over in Springfield, especially in Glenwood, that are likely going to be redeveloped anyhow, infrastructure problems there are quite serious to the point that sometimes they actually are catastrophic, and you will end up with a failure like that park on 28th Street, where the infrastructure and the units were so bad that the city had to close it down. So, what's the solutions on all of this stuff? Well, the obvious solutions are twofold. One, if you're going to have a park that's in an appreciating marketplace and the people can afford it, the resident-owned park is an excellent way of getting those parks redeveloped so that they can be a safe and decent place for people to live. If you're in areas where you don't have that same benefit, then you have to create funds to allow a nonprofit like St. St. Paul to go ahead and find a way to redevelop those parks. There is a third way that's being explored currently. The third way is to develop a new park on its own entirely. And so we're working with the city of Springfield and with the legislature to see if there's a possibility of developing a new park in Springfield that will serve as a place for people that are being either evicted out or having to move out to develop a new park out there. So we're looking at a site out in Springfield now, and we're hoping that we'll be able to acquire it sometime in the next year. There's a bit of I think there's a fair amount of environmental work we'll have to do on that.
We can follow up on that.
Yeah, we can follow up on that. But obviously, especially in places like Glenwood, where the city has a very strong interest in redeveloping those parks along that river, where they want that to be a commercial strip that would be their new front door, those parks are going to go away one way or the other, and the people are going to have to go there, go someplace. And that's another interesting thing about mobile home parks. We developed an apartment complex in Springfield a number of years ago, the Astor Apartments, the 202, and anticipated that we would have a lot of people who lived on fixed incomes in Glenwood moving in to that mobile home park, or into that apartment complex from the mobile home parks. Because obviously, if you're only going to have to pay 30% of your adjusted income to live in the Astor Apartments versus what you're paying for space rent and maintenance of a unit out there in Glenwood, we anticipated that we would see a lot of people come. That was not the case. We received no applications from Glenwood from any of the parks out there, and we canvassed pretty heavily to do so. And the reason we found out over time was that people that have modest incomes like to own something, many people do, and that mobile home, even if it's a pre-76, is their last tangible asset. And so we found that people that live in that life circumstance often do because this is the last tangible thing that they own and that they can call their dwelling that they own. So by having these parks redeveloped or by having a new one developed that we can have folks move into, I think there's a strategy for moving forward from there. Tim, do you want to give any comments on all this?
That's pretty thorough.
Can the Housing Policy Board do anything to help?
Yes, it can. First of all, we need to identify sites. Finding a park that is of large enough scale and size is difficult. And I would not encourage anyone to develop a park under 40 units because you're simply not going to be able to keep it affordable and maintain the park for under that kind of a number, under the model that we have. And so the result is that you have to have a fair piece of dirt, pretty good sized piece of dirt. Number two, obviously it's very important to work with the city in terms of how this is going to be zoned in if you're going to develop a new park. Okay. And that's another key element on this, is that we haven't seen a lot of new mobile home park development for obvious reasons. Okay? So how are we going to find a way to allow for more development of mobile home parks is going to be a requirement that we work with the cities to come up with that strategy. And as I say, we've been working very closely with the city of Springfield to see if there's a way to go ahead and do that on regular R1 type of properties. Obviously, we'd be very interested in SDC waivers for this type of a development. This is a problem right now because basically, if I'm not mistaken, all the SDC funding are not waivers, they're not waivers, absorption by the city of Eugene is currently at capacity or over capacity. And so a new round of that would have to come out if we're going to be able to increase that kind of project. Likewise, it would be nice to figure out a way to take a site like we have on 99 where we have the Dusk Dead On camping program, which used to be the Topper Mobile Home Park. John, remember?
My call. Who could forget?
To find a way to get that redone at the mobile home park again. That's a perfectly viable piece of dirt. But unfortunately, since it had not been occupied for a number of years, it now fell out of the zoning that it could have been put back into. So it was superseded by its C2 zone.
Right.
And now it has to be developed as a C2 property, which does present a problem for us if we're ever going to develop that as a mobile home park. So there are a number of ways to proceed on this, but one of the most important ones is a tool that was developed actually with Oregon Housing and the Oregon Solutions team a couple of years ago in assessing what your mobile home parks look like in your communities today. Because one of the problems we see is that they tend to not be well regulated in many circumstances, and they're kind of ignored. Because if it doesn't squeak, you don't oil it. And so this is how you end up with catastrophic failures. So by assessing what your mobile home parks look like, in terms of whether they're viable or not, and how long they're going to be viable, and then working with the owners, whether they're in-state or out-state, to make sure that the infrastructure can be maintained so that those parks can continue to be viable, would be probably a good tool.
So personally, I think of it as less of a problem in Eugene, but more of
a
a,
lot of aging parks out there.
and how about in the county?
That's I think that was a discussion that was brought up a little bit earlier. There's a lot. So just in the city of Oak Ridge, there's 2 more parks. We own 2 of the parks that are up there, Hillcrest Park and the Oak Ridge Mobile Home Park. There's another 2 parks that are in pretty bad condition, and they need to be dealt with. There's Parks Buena Vista in Crestwell, pretty good park. Actually, it's in bad condition. There's a number of parks out in those rural areas where the units are failing pretty regularly. And one of the issues about that is that if the park fails, or if the units in the park fail and are no longer habitable, those people have to go somewhere. And the vast majority of the time, they come into Eugene, if they're in this area around here, because that's where the services are. So obviously, finding a way to stabilize rural parks would be very valuable. John?
So there's a lot to say, and I know there's not a lot of time, so I'll try to talk almost as fast as Terry. In my view,
You didn't talk fast.
I'll talk faster. There are 2 sort of kinds of parks that were here, and Terry is looking at lower end parks, as he started by saying that, and their prices, thankfully, are not so high. The nicer parks are selling for multiple millions of dollars, and we don't have a strategy. We can't compete to buy those for the residents or a nonprofit. So we've got to figure out some strategies there. One of the things I learned from Terry's work is that some of these older parks have very small spaces. And so he's now got to find viable, decent, secondhand single wides. And I think I've heard you say that you've found a market. You've got a market. You've found a source for those.
We pick up about 5 or 10 a year, and they're single or double wides. Problem, of course, is that they are expensive to move and to site. And so it does work in some circumstances, but not at all.
So a couple of other thoughts here. I think Eugene is somewhat better off, not in terms of not having these older parks, but the city adopted a park closure ordinance 15 years ago, and a landlord who wants to close his or her park and redevelop it is going to have to pay the tenants a bunch of money, more than the state requires by a significant amount, and hire a housing counselor. That came through the Housing Policy Board, and a committee chaired by then City Councilor Jennifer Solomon, who had lived in a park earlier in her life. We asked Lane County to do the same. We asked the city of Springfield to do the same. Both chose not to. I think if Springfield had done that, we might be looking at the petition in a different way. Anyway, that's one point. Another point is that there's legislative interest in this stuff and privates and also utility interest. So the utilities have become aware that they're just pumping electricity into these older homes that are like energy sieves. It just pours out. There's no insulation. And so there's talk with utilities about funding some sort of replacement program. There was an effort to do a rehab program that came out of Coos and Curry counties. That proved not to be cost effective, so it's more now focused on replacement. Our legislative champion is a woman named House Representative Pam Marsh from Ashland, assisted by Julie Fahey from here. And Marsh passed a bill 2896, which does a bunch of things. Besides providing $3 million for a new park in Springfield, it also provides $9.5 million for park preservation. I'm not clear whether that includes infrastructure. I was just trying to read the bill and figure that out. But clearly infrastructure needs for those kinds of parks is a big deal. But $9.5 million, that's not going to go very far when a large park sells on the private market, a nice one, for $30 million. It also provides $2.5 million for home remediation, removal of the home with asbestos and replacing it with newer homes. So that's a positive there in 2896. There's also been a lot of thought going into this with the Energy Trust of Oregon, NOAA, and an organization called Craft 3, and trying to figure out ways to fund home replacement in the parks. What else? Anyway, there's a bunch there.
I just never can have enough time to ask Terry McDonald questions, so I have a couple of questions and a statement. Terry, it sounds as if, or when you talk about tools, really you're just talking about different ways to bring the cost down, right? Different sources of money, or ways to make it more efficient through zoning, or subsidies, or things of that nature?
Sure, I like, if you send me money, it's really good, or else I'll have to figure
Well, no, I'm
it
just
out.
trying, you said tools, and so I was...
Money's a good tool. But yes, we were always looking for ways to direct it.
No, God, thank you. I didn't know if I was missing anything. And then you were talking in one of your parks about Bonneville programs.
Yes.
But I presume that whatever utility district you find yourselves in, you're going to have to deal with whatever they have available for this, or is it, please?
Let me weigh in on that.
Yeah.
This is actually a very important point and something we can help with. And that is that Bonneville has a number of programs available out there. But the utility, the muni that they work with, in this case it would be Southern Springfield, or else EPUD outside of Eugene, and or else EWEB, which are all munis. They have to accept the funding to be put through them, but they have to pay for the administration of that. So the solar display that we put in place down in Saginaw was paid for by the Bonneville Energy Foundation, but the administration of the putting the money into the program had to be absorbed by EPUD. And so the result is that there are programs available to both sub and the EWEB that neither of those utilities have been willing to absorb the costs of that administration of those funds that are coming through them. So if we could encourage our utilities to accept these programs, and yes, they have some costs associated with it for them, because Bonneville will not pay for the admin. They'll pay for the grants, but not for the admin. That would be helpful.
What does admin usually run as a percent for the utility?
No clue.
Okay. A couple more quickies, but thank you. So you mentioned 40,000 units that are 1976 or pre-1976, which is amazing, because even if you assumed only one person lived in every one of those, which of course we cannot assume, that's 1% of the entire population of the state of Oregon, which is just, it's phenomenal, the scope of this. Just a couple of, one other thing, and that is, I had the opportunity in California, which is different, I know, to develop community solar with batteries that fed all the energy of all of the residents and in those parks, and utilities gave us virtually all the money, that plus tax investment. And so I don't know if there's an environment for that here. And then finally, are they still called mobile home parks?
No, manufactured home parks.
Okay. So, I call them mobile home parks. And then last is, does the state, if something becomes a manufactured home park, does the state have a permanent zoning classification so that we would not run into this patrician-type situation?
No. This answer is a little bit complicated. It's treated as a residential land use. It's an allowed use within residential zones. Washington State has that. Some communities in Washington State have a manufactured home park zone. Portland has adopted a manufactured home park zoning overlay and has applied it to a number. There aren't very many parks left in Portland. There's only 2, I think, left in Seattle. I think Portland's got 30-ish, mostly in the East County, I think. And what Portland has done is to adopt this zoning overlay. There's a huge problem for a city that wants to do that, and it's called Measure 37/50. That would be a taking, a reduction in value of the property to the property owner. So Portland has addressed that by, in its ordinance, allowing the property owner, the park owner, to increase its density. So in other words, add more units. So then the city has a viable argument to say to the park owner, no, you haven't lost value because we've allowed you to add more units. Now that would require there to be space to add more units, and I don't know how that works out. But so far, nobody in Portland has sued over that. But you can raise that issue at any time.
Okay.
So that's going to happen at some point. Some park owner in Portland is going to sue the city over that zoning overlay. But the goal was to say that you can still close the park, you can still redevelop it, but it has to be as a manufactured housing park. It can't be any other kind of residential use.
So process check here, it's 10 after, almost quarter past, and we try to adjourn on time. I'm going to skip the item 6, the Housing Policy Board work planning, and I think we can do renters protection in about 5 minutes, but you need some time too. But this conversation is...
I can do it in 5 minutes.
Huh?
I can do it in 5
Okay,
minutes.
because I think this conversation is important.
Yeah,
Okay,
or less.
okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Terry.
Sure, I can talk about what NEDCO's been doing. So NEDCO is currently working on some capacity building work around manufactured housing, and really what our role is. We've been brought to many of the tables across the state to figure out, what we can do. As John mentioned, there is a group that is coming together to talk about unit replacement or repair and rehab, and that involves Energy Trust, involves NOAA, involves Craft 3. It also involves us as a CDFI. So NEDCO has our lending arm, Community Lending Works. It's figured out how we might be able to do some gap financing in there to try to help residents really be able to replace units as they need to. We also are looking at park displacement and what our role is in that, and what the counseling role is in that. What we're starting to find is that type of counseling is really emergency services counseling. So it is really helping people figure out, as Terry mentioned, where in the world they can go. So it may not be exactly our role, but how does Lane County through the CAP agency really kind of help set up residents into what that next step is. The other big thing that we're doing that hasn't really been talked about is looking at manufactured housing, modular housing as an opportunity for a first-time home buyer. So understanding that first-time home buyer options are limited across the state, and getting new units on the ground as an affordable homeownership developer takes some time. And so how do you look at manufactured or modular housing as an opportunity to bring down cost and to also increase the number of units that can be put down as quickly as possible. So we've been working with an organization that's called Next Step. And they are based, they started out in Appalachia, and they are working through different states. Oregon is going to be one of the next states that they target to really help connect home buyers to housing counselors, to manufactured housing production companies, also with financing. So looking at how do we finance these things in a safe, effective manner, because as many of you know, NEDCO also does foreclosure counseling. And personally, as a foreclosure counselor, when I was there doing that work, it is very challenging to have someone walk in and say, I own the unit, but I do not own the land, and what can I do? So how are we helping first-time home buyers find that as a feasible option for them. We have a lot of interest in it. A lot of the clients who come to our doors want to know about it. So getting our team up and running, because we've been talking with Terry and his team about what does a new community look like, and how are we maybe looking at rental and ownership options there, and really making sure that we can create affordable units for first-time home buyers. So I would say that's kind of where we're at right now, is exploring all of those and really figuring out where do we come out in a way that really helps our community, and where are the other gaps where if it might not be us filling it, how are we getting those closed for our community.
So I'll ask you too,
Yeah.
to think about,
Yeah.
or can the Housing Policy Board be useful to you all in your endeavors?
Yeah, I mean, like Terry, money's great, so
We
we
don't have
also
any-
appreciate
we don't have any
that.
money.
Yeah, but I think that. But figuring out the city-controlled funds, how are they able to be used for manufactured housing? I think that is we're already starting to see that many funds out there, when you talk about repair rehab dollars with CDBG, manufactured housing is not an allowable use, right? So how are we talking about that as a need in our community, and how are we looking at funds that are out there trying to get them towards this population or to these types of housing? I also think that getting, the CET money that's going to be coming through, and the Housing Trust Fund, the advisory board that's being created, making sure that they're up to speed on this as a need in our community, because, again, I'll echo Terry saying that this is an important part of the housing continuum. So I think that the more people that are out there learning about it and educating themselves about it, the better. So, and we're going to be an open book. As we find things, we'll be reporting back.
Okay. Stephanie?
Just wanted to add a couple of things. So both City of Eugene and City of Springfield use a portion of our CDBG funds for manufactured home park repairs. And so those applications are available, and we try to work with as many homeowners as possible for those units. And so that's both in manufactured home parks where someone owns their unit, as well as people who are homeowners where they own both the unit and the land. We have in the past had an application for a park that wanted to basically become a resident-owned cooperative. City Council voted to support it. The project ultimately didn't move forward just because of some issues within the project itself. But there has definitely been a willingness in the past to consider those kinds of project proposals. And definitely with the current RFP, there are some resources. Home, CDBG, there are some different challenges with using those. It's not impossible. And then, of course, the last thing is that we will be considering new ideas with the construction excise tax proceeds. So definitely feel free to contact me with any thoughts about how we might utilize those dollars to support the work that's happening.
I'm sure we've all spent the CET money 10 times over.
Yes.
But it'd be great to either have somebody on the allocation committee who's familiar with mobile home park issues, manufactured home parks issues, or that you do bring in the same presenters to talk about it.
Yeah.
I want to respond to James Houston, who asked us at the beginning of the meeting to vote to support a statewide initiative petition effort to amend state law. And I assume that would mean that we would have to ask the city council to support such a proposal. I have been involved in rent control issues since 1983, when Springfield citizen group called Fair Share, doesn't exist anymore, but Fair Share did a local initiative referral for Springfield only, for manufactured home parks only, with rent control. I worked on it a lot. We got our butts kicked. We didn't get more than 30% of the vote in Springfield rent control, just Springfield, not all apartments. This is a tough hill to climb. It is a state statute. You can't change that law except by a state initiative. They're incredibly time-consuming and expensive. I don't believe that the council would consider anything we have to say unless we say it as part of the renter protection recommendations, which council has asked us to do. to do some study, make recommendations to council about what it can do to help renters. And I would say, I'm on that, thank you. And I would suggest that that committee could consider making among its recommendations, when it makes those recommendations, which is probably a year away, that it include a statewide initiative on rent control. Not that I would support that, because I'm not big on chasing windmills. But that's where this idea, I think, belongs.
Okay. Anybody else? Thank you, Terry. Thank you. So let me address briefly the Renters Protection Committee update. The committee, last month, we appointed that committee. There are several of us here who are on it. It has not yet met. Stephanie and I have been putting together sort of draft agendas and work plan and whatnot. Our first meeting is this coming Thursday, Wednesday, I can't remember exactly. September 11th at 10 o'clock, right here. And our rough agenda for that first meeting is just lots of time to get to know one another. It's a very disparate group. We bring them together a lot. And so I think it'll be important to develop some comfort with one another. We're going to review the renters survey and what council, the presentation that went to council on tenant from the task force that Josh was on. And then we're going to talk about goals and a work plan, and probably have a tentative schedule to put together for them to consider. And then we're going to have a little, because we've got that fair housing trainer in town, we're going to borrow a little bit of his time, her time, and give us some overview on fair housing. Is that a fair assessment? Okay, that's that. Questions about that? There will be more next month because we will have met. Consolidated plan?
Yes. So I did want to just let everybody know that we are starting to plan out what the consolidated planning process is going to look like. This is a joint endeavor between Eugene and Springfield. And we are in the process of selecting a consultant. And so I'll have more to report at the next meeting. But I did just want to kind of give folks a little bit of just a very short kind of overview of what is the consolidated plan, because it's not a great name. It doesn't communicate a lot. And so, but it's actually an extremely important process, and it actually generates a lot of information that is useful for a number of different community efforts and initiatives. So really, kind of writ large, the purpose of the consolidated plan, and this is a requirement from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development that we must complete in order to be eligible to receive federal HUD funds. So that's the reason why we do it. But it also is a very useful process. So the purpose is to assess housing and community needs of low-income people and neighborhoods through data analysis, community involvement, and agency consultation. As I mentioned, the area for this is the cities of Eugene and Springfield. The other parts of the county are covered under the state's consolidated plan, which provides funding, the home and CDBG and other funding to those areas. So the second purpose is to develop goals, objectives, strategies, and metrics to invest CDBG and home funds over the next 5 years in the areas of greatest demonstrated need. There is an effort to coordinate with other plans and resources. So you're thinking about more than just your home and CDBG resources. You're really trying to figure out, well, how can these resources work best in collaboration with the many other resources that flow into our community related to affordable housing, community development, and homelessness. And then also consider how government policies affect availability and affordability of housing opportunities and impact low-income neighborhoods. So on the next page of the presentation, what this really just kind of lays out is the structure. So every 5 years, the cities of Eugene and Springfield create a consolidated plan. There are no dollars attached to that plan because we don't know what Congress is going to allocate to the home and CDBG programs each year. So, but it creates the framework and basically the menu of the things that you could do over the next 5 years. Then cities each year adopt what's called an action plan, and that is where we know how much money we're going to receive that year, and we go through an allocation process to decide which programs are going to receive support in that year. And then at the end of each year, we do what's called the CAPER, the Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report, which reports on all the projects that we've been working on, the progress towards the 5-year goals, and tries to kind of share all the different pieces of work that are happening using these resources. As you kind of look, there are multiple steps in the process, which I'm not going to go into right now, but it does kind of logically follow. You're looking at what you've done in the past, you're thinking about community needs, you're developing strategies to address those needs, and then you're identifying, well, what are our tangible goals and outcomes that we want to achieve over the next 5 years? And there's several questions that you ask yourself as you're going through each of those processes. So the last time around, when we did this process, we did multiple forms of outreach in the community. We did a community survey. We incorporated results of a survey of affordable housing residents. We did forums. We did public hearings. And so my expectation is that we'll be doing some combination of activities, outreach activities in the community to not just assess quantitatively what the needs are, but also people's perspectives. We also try to utilize whatever other studies, resources have been developed or completed in recent years because we don't want to reinvent the wheel, especially if work has already been done to assess particular issues. So for example, all of the work on the TAC report, that will be a good resource in terms of looking at issues related to homelessness. I'll stop there. Take any questions?
New census data won't be available in time to help.
No.
Okay. Questions? Joe?
I kept quiet about the TAC report because it was done when I wasn't here, but I did question the methodology of it because it did not count well over 1,000 homeless young people that school districts in the county identified as homeless. So my question, I'm getting new at government planning. My bias is that there's a diminishing marginal utility towards more and more and more planning sometimes. I don't know where that point is. So first question, take Springfield for example. All of those mechanisms you said you engaged people, do you have any idea of how many people, add it all up, you actually engaged in that process? I'm just curious. Was it like a big amount? Was it a small amount? I don't expect you to have the number, but that's the question. You don't have to answer it now.
No, I can answer
Go
that
for
question.
it.
So,
That's
so in the last time around, we did, surveys were sent to 67 agency representatives. We received 44 responses.
So those would be agencies that serve low-income people?
Yes.
All kinds of, yeah.
Yeah, all kinds of agencies. We also did a community survey, and that received 92 responses. The survey of affordable housing residents, I think we had over 500 responses to that survey. And then we had public hearings, community meetings. There were over 30 meetings that were held.
Well,
so it was pretty extensive.
Yeah, and I offer this because really I'm not part of Springfield government, but if I could lend any ability to generate more involvement, especially from residents and people that need services, in our community, utilizing the platform of county commissioners and convening things. I would be delighted to assist in that way. And I'd be delighted if you want to advocate for, there's 4 other commissioners and all of them represent a piece of Eugene. And I'd be more than happy if you would like to advocate for their using that to dig deeper, whatever the methodology happens to be.
If the county wants to help us, that would be great, because we would love to take advantage
Yeah,
of your
well,
resources.
Not to play games here, but I'm speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for the county, and I would love the county to help too. And that's what I'm trying to offer, is to see how that could occur.
Well, and
Because
I
I don't
will
know.
share-
I don't. You dig into the bowels of that, and it's a whole
Yeah.
thing.
So I will share, so part of this is coordination with the county, because the county receives the continuum of care
That's
grant.
what it sounded. Yes.
And so it is a process where we have always worked with county staff and had their involvement.
Yeah.
I presume you have all that. I was just offering on the commissioner level, because I don't know if they've gone out and beat the bushes for you or not. That's all, just making the offer.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure, that'd be great.
Okay, anything else? Then we are adjourned.
Well, I almost don't talk too much.